Hey guys, in today's video we'll focus on superhero games on the Amiga, but only on these that had their origins based in comic books. So no Robocop, Terminator, Super Frog or Wonder Dog here. Not that I would call them superheroes anyway. This will also be a very specific list, as I've decided to remove the word best from its title. Why, you may wonder? Well, most of the games here are really awful. Few are okay, but none deserving the word. For a system as powerful and chock full of amazing titles as Amiga was, its superhero showing was subpar at the very best. So grab a drink and prepare to watch a video full of surprisingly bad games. But before you do, please hit those like and subscribe buttons below. It helps more than you know. All in all, I've counted 11 superhero games on the Amiga, and since it's the top 10 list, the worst of them deserves a special mention. The best way to describe this game is the very top comment on Lemon Amiga website under its entry. It simply says, avoid. And that's exactly what I would have suggested. I mean, take a look at this recording. I am struggling, literally fighting with the game to do something, anything. And that's the very first stage. It's not fun whatsoever. Now, I understand that perhaps lack of manual or any other documentation may be an issue here, but I tried whatever I could to figure out what and how I'm supposed to do here, but found nothing. On top of that, I doubt that I've ever seen a weaker portrayal of titular Men of Steel, more like Men of Feathers in this game. It's a nice looking game that is virtually unplayable. When I saw the title screen, then comic book-like gameplay introduction, and finally the main character sprite when the first level loaded up, I was really hyped up about it. And this is basically as much good as I can say about it. The idea was decent, this being an interactive story where player would take part in situations that were happening on pages of a comic book, but execution missed the mark, by a mile. All characters move in a jerky, annoying manner, and saying that the game is difficult to control and impossible to control reliably is an understatement. It's currently ranked 2.1 out of 10 on Lemon Amiga, and I believe this score to be quite accurate for what is here on showing. But take a look and judge by yourself. Not all Batman games are made the same, and this sadly is a perfect example of that. Good graphics and serviceable sounds were not enough to save it. The game looks as if someone got a Batman license and a very restrictive deadline to use it. The idea is there somewhere hidden between the piles of incompetence and bad game design, but it fails to surface at any point, making this game below average at best. For a short while, when I ran it first, I thought it would be akin to Nintendo's brilliant Batman game, but with better graphics. It is, however, nowhere near the quality of that game, so only play it if there's literally nothing better available. And I bet that there nearly always will be. TMNT is a US version with worse graphics and scrolling than already bad next game on this list. And all I have to say about it, which frankly is not that much, will be said with that next entry. But have a look anyway, to be able to compare it with that following game. I have fond memories of this game, on NES. This, however, is not a great port of that title. It's okay looking, even if using a bit odd color palette, but the jerky scrolling is beyond painful to accept in 2022. And yeah, I realize that it's an older title, but I'm replaying it now, so I look at it through prism of what I'm used to now. It's a platforming side-scrolling beat-em-up with overworked top-down view sections, where you travel between sewers and buildings. Each of these contains earlier mentioned side-scrolling section. I never understood why in this game turtles had to fight bees and frogs. I understand the foot soldiers, but the animals, not really. It's not a great game, but it's not entirely bad. So take it as you wish. I was hoping for explosive and bullet hell I am below gameplay, and I got a below average platformer instead. It doesn't look bad and sounds are okay, but everything else is quite blunt and boring. The license used here is definitely wasted. And I get that portraying an anti-hero like Dredd who's both good at heart and also extremely violent is not easy. I get that. But this just under-delivered on all fronts. It's not as bad as some earlier titles, especially that you can actually play it and precisely control your character on screen, but it feels like the most generic and painfully average shooting platformer, in Judge Dredd's clothing. I wouldn't recommend it, but on the other hand, I'd play it in an instant rather than any game that I spoke about before. The best out of all Turtles games on the Amiga. But that's not saying a lot, as the other two were pretty bad. It's a port of an arcade beat-em-up, and while everything apart from music present there seems to be here too, it's in much reduced capacity. The character sprites animations lack most frames, making their movement jumpy, and the collision detection seems to have a life of its own. Not to mention the sounds that there seems to be just a few of, repeated all over the place. I loved it as a kid, but can't stand it nowadays. It didn't even make to my top 10 best Amiga beat-em-ups games list, and there weren't that many of these either. Approach at your own discretion. The Punisher promises a lot with its straight out of comic book cover title screen and weapon selection before each mission. Promises an action-packed game that will glue player to the screen for hours. Promises. It under-delivers. Sure, the graphics, at least in my opinion, are pretty good, and the Operation Wolf-like gameplay is good fit for the character, but it just feels wrong. The controls leave a lot to be desired, and everything is so devoid of fluidity, it's a pain to watch in motion on screen. Arguably, it's still much more of a game than some other titles on this list, as basically everything works here. It just doesn't work the way I would have hoped it would. It's not a bad game per se, but it's also definitely not a good one. The Amazing Spider-Man on Amiga may not be as innovative or groundbreaking as it was on C64, but it's pretty good nonetheless. The graphics leave a bit to be desired on this 16-bit machine, but other than that, it's all here. The gameplay is a mixture of platforming with puzzling, with very enjoyable, if a bit clunky, wall crawling and spiderweb swinging mechanics. The puzzles are well thought out, and each screen offers a new challenge. The sprites may be very small, lemmings-like in size, but they're very well animated and full of character. It's one of those titles that require a bit of patience at first for the player to get used to the mechanics, but after a while become a pleasure to play. It's a first actually good game on this list, and that's saying something. Batman the Caped Crusader is a very specific title, and that's probably what makes it so good. First of all, Batman the Caped Crusader offers two separate stories to follow here. And it's a very unique in its design game, not being a typical platformer or beat 'em up, but a mixture of many genres with adventure vibes being the most prominent ones. The sprites are huge and nicely animated, and each scene takes place in a different frame as if it was torn out of pages of a comic book. It took me a while to figure out what and where to do, but after doing so, it became an enjoyable experience. It's definitely a title that adventure game fans will appreciate the most. One of the very few games on this list that actually holds any value. It's not overly long, but at the very least it's completable from start to end. It offers a mixture of platforming stages with driving and flying. Batman the movie roughly follows the plot of original cinematic title and mixes mentioned genres for quite enjoyable and varied experience. I played this on C64 first, and I gotta say that given Amiga's power, it's a bit disappointing. I mean, the graphics are nice and all, but it seemed more fluid and fair, especially in platforming stages. On Commodore's little machine, that is. Overall, it's a decent game and one that's a good fit in any Amiga lover's collection, and most importantly, a rare gem among a third collection on this list. Thanks a lot for watching up until now. I realize it couldn't have been easy as these games were just, well, special, for the lack of a better word. One way or another, if you for whatever reason liked it or enjoy what I do, hit those like and subscribe buttons below. And if you're feeling especially generous, you may want to consider a small donation. It would help me deliver more better content, upgrade my aging editing rig, and perhaps even get a camera. Details are in the description below. For me, this is all, so have a good one and I'll see you next time.